Thank you. So we are aware of the community interest in the National Assessment of Coal Seam Gas, chemicals used in coal seam gas in Australia. Our priority is ensuring this is a robust study, ensuring that we get it right and that it informs the community, informs regulators and informs industry. So I acknowledge it has taken longer than we originally anticipated, and we've said that before. It is a study of complexity that has not been done before. So the nearest comparable study would be the US EPA study. That took about 4 years into human health.
The study's not actually looking at that much, though. It's only a very artificial subset of fracking chemicals used at a particular point in time. So, anyway, carry on.
So it has been an iterative process, iterative process of science. So it went through a process of literature reviews, identifying chemicals, developing models, predicting concentrations, reviewing hazards, assessing risks. There's also been a thorough process of peer review. As I said, we understand the criticality of getting this right, and so we've placed peer review as a very important aspect of that process. Since the last hearing, since May, we've had a number of review and checking processes. So we've had a process of ensuring the consistency and clarity of the reports. So,
sorry, you've been checking since May. Did you say?
This will be 14 technical reports of 4,000 pages. So,
sorry, 14. What did you say?
14 technical reports of 4,000 pages. So we have been reviewing the reports, and from a quality assurance perspective, in addition to those peer review processes I mentioned earlier, we've been reviewing the reports from a quality assurance process and working with the authors in CSIRO, in NICNAS and in the department in order to ensure that the reports are clear, addressing issues raised in the peer reviews, ensuring that there's no ambiguity in what the technical reports are saying. So, as I said, that's been an iterative process, and for that reason, those reports are still draft. We've also been through a process of ensuring the accuracy of the data that's been used in the assessment. So that's also been happening since we last met. And we've also had a process to look at the overall assessment as a whole, so looking at the whole suite of reports and ensuring that it provides a coherent and rigorous body of work. So that as well has been happening over the last few months. And we've also had the states checking what we've been saying, what the report's saying about their own regulatory framework. So these are steps that we've been taking over the last few months in order to ensure that the reports are rigorous and accurate. The other element we've been doing is ensuring that the reports are accessible to the community. So, as I said, 14 reports, 4,000 pages. The Independent Expert Scientific Committee on Coal Seam Gas and Large Coal Mining, it has reinforced to us the need to ensure that these reports are accessible to not just scientists, but also to the community, to interested groups, to regulators, to industry. So we've also been working to ensure that we have we're calling it a plain English summary, so a short 20-page overview document that outlines the key findings of the assessment and puts it into context. We've also been preparing some web material and other information that will make that available to the community and others. So,
okay, I've just got a number of follow-up questions. Thanks for that detailed answer. Who did the peer review?
So the peer review has been done. I'll just find it in my notes, Senator. There's been peer reviews of the different reports. We've had Professor John Chapman, who has done a peer review of the environment components. Professor John Chapman has previously had experience in New South Wales EPA, so he looked at the environment risk assessments. There were reviews of the conceptualisation and modelling reports. So these are reports that CSIRO prepared, and CSIRO commissioned Lloyd Townley, Principal Environment and Water Engineer, and Johnny Olson of GEO Associates to review the conceptualisation modelling reports. We also had the US EPA review the environment risk assessment and also the environment conceptualisation reports. So they were chosen because they were doing, as we mentioned earlier, a similar study. And Health Canada reviewed the human health risk assessment reports. So NICNAS chose Health Canada because it was addressing similar issues in its jurisdiction, and Health Canada also asked for Environment Canada to have a look as well. So that's been a process of structured peer review. And then there's also been the review, those other checking processes I mentioned earlier.
Yes.
So New South Wales, Queensland government agencies, so they looked at the regulatory arrangements, and CSIRO looked at the overall approach in terms of how the different reports all come together to make a consistent, cohesive whole.
Okay, thank you. And is the feedback from those peer reviewers available, or can you make that available?
Senator, I don't think it'd be possible to make that available at this point, short of the reports themselves being made publicly available. The content that they covers the content in the report, so I don't think that would make sense.
Will you be releasing those peer-reviewed comments after you've published, finally, the actual review?
We'll take that on notice. We haven't given consideration to that yet. So
we'll consider that a formal request.
Yep.
Thank you. When I discussed this with Nick Nass on some ungodly hour of Monday, I think, they referred to what sounded like a very regular back and forwards between yourselves and them in terms of style and tone, if I can remember their phrasing properly, and mostly, and so apparently there were some substantive changes which he was not able to go into, and some style and tone changes. Can you explain for me what the substantive changes that the department requested were? And can you also explain to me why you would need to make style and tone changes in technical reports if you were indeed preparing this 20-page plain English summary?
Senator, it's important that as a collection of 14 reports, there is a consistent look and feel to them. So anyone who's reading them, as I said, they were authored by Nick Nass and CSIRO and the department. So part of the changes that we suggested went to structure of the report, so that there was a consistent structure and look and feel to the reports. As I mentioned earlier, in some cases where when we read the reports and it was a bit ambiguous what it was saying, it may have been clear to a scientific audience, but to others it may have been less clear. So we went back to them and asked them to make changes where it would improve the clarity of what it was saying, so improving the clarity of the message and the meaning of what it was saying. So that's the sort of nature of the comments that we were working through with the authors. So it has been a back and forth process with them over the course of this year. It's getting it to a point where, from our point of view, it is a report where the reports are clear, understandable, and removing the ambiguities that might be in the reports.
Okay. Did any of your requests require them to alter any of the scientific findings?
Senator, the science was done by the agencies independently, so we commissioned CSIRO, Nick Nass and the other part of this department to do the reports, because they're the experts that have the experts around the science. So we didn't ask them about the science was left to them, so
okay.
We didn't go to that.
I just thought I'd check. Thank you. So can you clarify whether it's at the stage of having a draft report yet?
The reports are still draft. So through this process that we've been working through over the course of this year, we still have draft reports. We're still
How long have they been in draft form? When was the first time that you got something from, whether it's Nick Nass or CSIRO, that you considered a draft report? How many years ago was that?
As the committee has heard before, there have been draft reports that have gone to the ISC and to other forums over the course of the last couple of years.
Couple of years?
So
okay.
You've asked previously about reports.
Yes.
So
I'm just trying to get at how long the scientific process has taken and how long the editing process, if you like, is taking. So when did we reach the end of the science and the start of the look and feel massaging?
So I wouldn't quite characterise it as the science was finished in 2014. They were draft reports, say, that the ISC considered and provided comment on. The science continued throughout last year and through to early this year. So different reports have been at different stages over that period of time, and so it would be incorrect to characterise it as the science was done 2 years ago and we have then spent 2 years editing. That's not the case.
Good. I'm glad to hear it. Thank you. Okay, so when do you think we'll have a final report?
Well, final release of the report is a matter for government, Senator, and we expect it in the near future, but we can't be more definitive about that at this stage.
Okay. So what's the process that it has to go through now? You'll finish doing your look and feel editing, and then what? Does it have to go to the minister? What's the process?
Yes, so we'll finish the final editing of the reports, the final production of the communications summary, the material there, and that will be provided to the minister for consideration and appraisal before it goes out.
Okay, and then it'll be up to him to decide when to release it? Okay, so he hasn't seen a copy of it yet?
He has not, no.
Okay. Is there any concern that it will be out of date by the time that it's published?
Senator, this report will provide a lot of new information, new knowledge. So, as I mentioned, there have been a number of tools, models, conceptual methodologies that have been developed through this study. This is a lot of new information that will inform the community, it will inform regulators, it will inform proponents, industry. So there's actually some additional work which is coming out of the assessment which will help inform the future. So, for example, there's a guidance manual which we've talked about before that will help to provide best practice to regulators and industry in terms of how to do risk assessments on coal seam gas proposals, of chemicals used in coal seam gas proposals, and that will provide a consistent and transparent approach to industry and regulators on how they can do that going forward. So the assessment is a point-in-time assessment, that is correct, but it is informing industry practice, it's informing regulatory practice, and so the lessons that can be taken from this assessment will be relevant and beneficial going forward.
Okay, just to follow up on that, you said it will inform regulatory practices. How so, when the majority of the approvals have already been issued, in fact, were issued 5 years ago? Can you just walk me through how you anticipated influencing the regulatory process, particularly the federal one, obviously, but any extra comments about the state processes as well would be useful?
My colleagues from the regulator will assist with that.
Thank you.
In terms of, just while those colleagues are coming to the table, Senator, in terms of the regulations or the regulatory activities that are the responsibility of the states, into occupational health and safety, workplace safety and those sorts of things, it will help inform that. So that's very clear cut.
Okay,
Transport safety as well. Transport regulation.
Senator Shane Gaddis, Assistant Secretary, Environment Standards Division. You'll recall we've spoken about the CSG water plans on a number of occasions in this forum. Obviously, those are periodically reviewed at certain stages of the CSG development schedule. So,
Hank, sorry, are you talking about the bioregional plans that ISCA's doing, or the management plans that proponents do for each project?
The proponents' water management plans that are required under the conditions of approval. They are periodically reviewed at certain stages of the development schedule for the CSG projects. We're looking to work with the companies when the CSG chemicals assessment is released to update those management plans to bring in the new best practice.
Okay. I'm pleased to hear that it will in fact have some impact on the regulatory process.
The second stage, Senator, is that for projects that haven't yet been approved or some of the referrals for expansion projects to CSG chemicals, the new practice can be incorporated into the EIS or into the assessment of those projects.
Okay, can be. Will it be?
Beg your pardon?
Will it be so incorporated?
I believe it will be, Senator.
Okay.
I've stayed over for this one, but my assessment colleagues have gone, and we have already started with some of the preliminary findings to incorporate those into the assessments at this stage.
Yes.
The guidance manual is also a very helpful tool because it allows us to have a standard against which to assess the risk assessments that come in under the conditions of approval.
Okay.
And Senator, just to answer very explicitly your question, yes, it will be reflected and taken into account in any new approvals.
Okay, great. Look, thank you. Just one final question from me, or perhaps two, but same issue. Given that it deals with a discrete time period, I think it's 2012, and a discrete assemblage of chemicals that were being used at that time, I understand there's been some changes to industry practice in the effluxation of time. Is there any intention to assess the chemicals that are being used today? And do we know how different those are from the ones that this comprehensive review is looking at?
Senator, there's not an intention under this process to do that.
So-
And under any new fresh process or any other process?
Senator, the process that I just explained would need to go through and do the risk assessment for any new chemicals that the companies are using.
Could you say that again,
So
please?
any new chemicals that the companies are using, the
Yes.
process that I just explained of review and update of the management plans and new assessments would need to incorporate any changes in the chemicals that the companies are using.
Okay, so they specify the chemicals they're using in those plans, and
They
so if
do.
they want to change that, they've got to run that past you.
Exactly. And any chemicals that they use must be published on their websites.
Okay, so what would you then assess them against, though, if the comprehensive study is only for a subset of chemicals and the proponent now wants to use a different one that wasn't in that assessment?
So-
How do you have the knowledge base to know whether that's an appropriate change and a safe change?
As I mentioned, Senator, the guidance manual is a very important tool that we will use in the future to improve our assessment of that. At the moment, we use just standard risk assessment methodology. So there's Australian standards, national standards for risk assessment. We broadly apply those criteria to the risk assessments they provide to us. This provides us with a more refined tool to assess the chemical assessments against.
Okay, so it gives you a methodology, but it doesn't give you information about the specific chemicals. Is that correct?
We're probably getting to a level of detail that's beyond my expertise.
Well, that's what we're here for.
Senator. So we have, within our department, we have assessment officers that assess the plans. They can seek advice from a range of experts. For
Yes.
example, we've spoken previously about the expert panel that we use to assess the plans, the water plans.
Yeah.
That expert panel sought advice from various experts, from universities, from parts of the department that have chemical expertise, and they provide advice to the panel. The panel then provides advice to the minister on whether or not the plan's acceptable.
So would NICNAS have a look at those revised plans?
I don't believe that they have had a look. We had there was a section in the department in the supervising scientist division that had a look. I think there was the
Yeah.
University of New South Wales. There are a range of experts. I'm not sure if
Okay.
it was NICNAS.
Yeah, so why not NICNAS, given they're the lead agency doing the fracking chemicals study? Surely they would be the best place to have input into the new chemicals.
What we would want to do, Senator, like, as we've talked about many times, we'll make sure that we've got the appropriate expertise, whether that's within the department or
Yeah.
if we need to go externally, we'll go externally to make sure that any new chemicals that are being proposed for use, either by existing approval holders or under any new approvals, will be adequately assessed. So I can assure you, we'll make sure that we use best placed advice to inform that assessment.
Okay, thank you, and
Senator,
I
think
don't
in
wish to
that
belabor the
context too,
point,
it's
but
probably worth just reinforcing that, this study will provide or capture a lot of the intellectual property from NICNAS in terms of the methods and approaches for
Yes.
looking at the above ground impacts of those chemicals. So that's
Yes.
the focus of this study.
Okay, so if I can summarise that to make sure I've understood you all correctly, there's not going to be a subsequent comprehensive study to look at modern day chemicals, but you've learned about the framework for assessing risk, and you would use that framework through the normal regulatory channels to assess any new chemicals. Is that correct?
I think that's,
Okay, all right, I think I
The only
understand.
other thing-
With input from experts as
Yeah.
required, potentially
Yes.
including
The only
NICNAS.
other thing I would say, Senator, is that the chemicals that are used by the companies are relatively static. There's not a lot of change in terms of which chemicals are used. So even
Okay.
though the study has been done for a certain period of time, we expect that it'll have a wide range of applicability
Yes.
currently.
Okay. One final question. Thank you for your patience, Chair. The NICNAS study didn't, as far as I can recall, examine the interaction between the chemicals, a cocktail effect, if you like. That seemed to me to be a pretty gross oversight, or a bit of a restriction in the scope of the study. Is there any intention to do an examination of the cocktail effect of fracking chemicals, whether it's those 2012 chemicals or whether it's today's chemicals in usage?
Senator, so I think what you're talking about there is the mixtures of chemicals when
Yes.
they're used. So that wasn't looked at in this study
No.
because that would require a hypothetical scenario of this chemical or that chemical, and really it would be multiple permutations of what hypothetical scenario you use. So the information from this study and from other work that's being done would help to inform site-specific assessments, which when proponents are saying that they've got a specific mixture that they have in mind, then an assessment could be done on that. So we wouldn't be proposing to do a whole-scale
I see.
assessment.
But you will look at the cocktail effect when you get a specific proposal, as opposed to through this NICNAS process. Is that what you mean?
Senator, I might be able to help you there. The conditions of approval for, I'm not sure if it's all, I couldn't say it's all, but some of the major CSG projects have required them to go and do an ecotox test of a representative fracking fluid. it's a bit of a challenging space because we use representative, because in different geographies and different geomorphologies, they have to change the mix. So it's almost, it would be, to do all of them would be, they would never finish. So they have done
So we'll
that.
just let them experiment on our geology.
Oh, I'm not sure.
That's a comment. Carry on.
So they have done that work, and they do it as a part of the water management plans, and it's been approved.
Yes. Okay. Thank you very much. I have more questions, but I've had more than my fair share. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. No questions? Okay. Well, thank you very much for officers from